So, here's where it all begins. Picture this, a late evening in a small, cluttered office where a young, ambitious inventor who once faced complete exile is scribbling away with fervor. This is Benjamin Franklin, a man who many said was doomed to failure. But let me tell you, Franklin didn't see his failures as an end. No, he viewed them as stepping stones. That's how he turned his hard knocks into a legacy of invention and diplomacy. See, Ben figured something out early in his life, a secret that has powered legacies for centuries, the power of definite purpose. Now, here's where things get interesting. Benjamin wasn't just some deluded optimist. He was someone who deeply understood his purpose. Think about it. He started out as a runaway apprentice, found himself in a foreign city with nothing but hope, and all it took was that glimmer of purpose to transform him into an inventor with a legacy that still echoes today. The lessons in his story are crystal clear. When he devised his famous lightning rod, he wasn't just thinking of invention, he was thinking long-term impact. How's that for a definite purpose? But what exactly does it mean to have a definite purpose? Well, let me take you on a quick journey to the early 1900s. There I was, a young man with a notepad full of curiosity, interviewing hundreds of successful people. One of those folks was a fellow by the name of Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie was a steel magnate who believed that knowing what you want is the first step toward achieving it. From him, I learned that true purpose is about more than just personal gain. It's about understanding what you want to offer the world. And this perspective became the foundation of my own work. Fast forward to our modern day, let's talk about Elon Musk. Now, regardless of what you think about him, his story is a fascinating case study in definite purpose. I mean, here's a guy who was told that private space travel was a pipe dream. But Musk, driven by the purpose of making life multiplanetary, wasn't deterred by the naysayers. He founded SpaceX and against all odds launched rockets into orbit. That's commitment to purpose if I've ever seen one. So what's the psychology behind having a definite purpose? Look, when you know your purpose, it becomes your North Star amidst the chaos. It's what keeps you going when things get tough. Think about Abraham Lincoln. He wasn't just another politician. He was someone who rose from a humble log cabin background, navigating personal losses and political failures, to become a president who changed the course of history. Lincoln exemplified the resilience that comes from a clear purpose. He believed fiercely in the Union. Here's where you come into play. Imagine if you could channel the same energy these historical figures had by finding your own definite purpose. What would that look like for you? Maybe it's a dream you're currently putting on hold. Or perhaps it's an idea that you can't stop thinking about. Whatever it is, committing to this purpose can be transformative. But I get it. It's not always easy. The modern world is filled with distractions that make it hard to commit to a single path. Sometimes even your closest circle might not see the vision. Ever heard the phrase, "She doesn't love you, she loves your potential"? It often highlights our society's tendency to fall for the dream rather than the reality. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. See, your potential is what fuels your purpose. It's about aligning that potential with everything you do. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a thought. What is your definite purpose? What would it mean for you to commit to it fully? In the same way Franklin tinkered with his inventions late into the night, or Musk imagines a world amongst the stars, you too can find and harness your true purpose. That's where transformation begins, not just for you, but for the world that's waiting to see what you can do. All right, let me take you back to a moment that could have stifled any burgeoning TV career. Picture this. A young Oprah Winfrey fired from her first television job for being too emotionally invested. Now, most people would probably hear that and retreat, think, maybe I'm not cut out for this. But what did Oprah do? She leaned into the very emotion that got her let go. This is one of those moments where you either crumble under the weight of rejection or use it as a springboard to greatness. And Oprah, well, she chose the latter. She found her voice, one so genuine and relatable that it would eventually resonate with millions. Her path wasn't straightforward, but each rejection became a stepping stone, shaping her into a media powerhouse. You see, it's not so much about experiencing failure that's almost a given, but it's how you process it, how you learn from it. I've always found this idea riveting, how the very thing that could bury you can instead propel you forward if you let it. Now let's switch gears and talk about Jack Ma. This is a guy who faced rejection time and time again, rejected from Harvard 10 times, and even KFC didn't want to hire him. Imagine that, when everyone else is getting the job and you're left wondering if maybe, just maybe, you're not meant to do anything special. But Jack didn't let these setbacks define him. Instead, he became the founder of Alibaba, one of the largest e-commerce platforms today. It's crazy when you think about how those early failures were integral to his success story. But here's the thing, what did both Oprah and Jack have in common? A relentless belief in their potential. They didn't see these setbacks as personal failings, but as necessary detours. And that's a key mindset shift we all can learn from. You've got to believe that these obstacles are part of the journey, not the end of it. It's a reframe, sure, but one that can shift your trajectory. Speaking of trajectory, let's go back a little further in history and talk about Frederick Douglass. Here's a man born into slavery who became one of the greatest American orators. The odds were insurmountable, but Douglass didn't merely accept his circumstances. He used his experience, as bitter and brutal as it was, to inform his powerful speeches that would later galvanize the abolitionist movement. His story exemplifies how someone can convert oppressive circumstances into a platform for change. There's a thread here, right? Whether it's Oprah, Jack Ma, or Frederick Douglass, it's about resilience and transformation. If these individuals looked at their challenges as permanent roadblocks, the world wouldn't have experienced their transformative contributions. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if you approached your own failures in the same way? What if each rejection, every setback, was just the universe nudging you closer to where you truly belong? And let's not forget Abraham Lincoln, often cited as one of America's greatest presidents. His early life reads like a series of unfortunate events, failed businesses, lost elections, and personal heartbreaks. Yet each of those experiences was like a chisel, shaping a leader who could guide a nation through its most turbulent times. Lincoln didn't shy away from failure, he embraced it as a learning tool. His story is a reminder that even the toughest paths can lead to extraordinary outcomes. The psychology here is fascinating. It's about shifting from a fixed to a growth mindset, a concept popularized by Carol Dweck. When you see failure as a way to grow, you're more likely to persist and eventually thrive. And in today's world, where the pace of change is faster than ever, cultivating this kind of resilience is more crucial than ever before. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a part of it. So let me ask you this, what are you going to do with your failures? Are they going to be the end of the road, or are you going to use them as building blocks towards realizing your potential? Think about it. You have the same choice as these incredible figures from history, the choice to see beyond the failure and instead focus on the possibilities it unveils, the potential it holds, if you're willing to harness it. All right, let's dive into something really intriguing about the power of the people you surround yourself with. Let me start with a story about a woman named Barbara Corcoran. Now, you might know her as the queen of real estate or from her seat on Shark Tanks, but what you might not know is that her journey began with a simple handshake and a $1,000 loan from her boyfriend. Imagine this. She took that tiny loan, just $1,000, and transformed it into one of the most successful real estate companies in New York City. But here's the kicker, when that relationship ended, instead of crumbling, she used the breakup as fuel to propel her further. It's a classic example of not just resilience, but the power of mentorship and partnership. Now hold on, because here's where it gets interesting. Barbara had this uncanny ability to tap into the potential of every connection she made. Whether it was clients, employees, or even competitors, everyone was a piece of the puzzle in her success journey. She didn't just see people for what they were, she saw what they could become together in a collective effort. She was building her own mastermind group, and she didn't even need to call it that because it was natural for her. People saw her vision and became part of it. Let's pause for a second and look at Marcus Aurelius. I know jumping from real estate to Roman emperors might seem a bit of a stretch, but stay with me. Marcus was this philosopher king who managed to wield almost absolute power with a remarkable level of mindfulness and discipline. How did he do it? Well, he surrounded himself with some of the greatest minds of his time, philosophers like Fronto, and teachers who kept him grounded and introspective. He was constantly reflecting, learning, and most importantly, listening. And that's the essence of the mastermind principle. The sum is greater than the individual parts. When you think about it, Marcus and Barbara, despite the centuries that separate them, were both playing the same game of life. They both knew the secret. The people around you can elevate your entire journey. Marcus's advisors helped him navigate the complexities of ruling an empire, while for Barbara it was about leveraging every relationship to build an empire in a different realm. Isn't it fascinating how this principle is a common thread through history? Now let's bring this back to our modern life. Think about Oprah Winfrey for a moment. She was famously fired from her first anchor job in Baltimore because they said she was too emotionally invested. Can you believe that? But what happened next is what makes her story incredible. She didn't do it alone. Oprah created a circle. Mentors, producers, friends, all contributing to something larger than themselves. Her emotional investment became her strength, precisely because the right people supported her vision. This brings us to the psychology behind why the mastermind principle is so potent. When you surround yourself with a diverse group of thinkers, you benefit from a vast pool of knowledge and experience. You gain perspectives you might never consider on your own. You see, each connection challenges your ideas, pushes your limits, and encourages growth. It's like having multiple maps to explore uncharted territories of your own potential, and in the end, it's about harnessing those collective energies to move from where you are to where you want to be. So here's something to ponder over your next cup of coffee. Who's part of your mastermind group? Are the people you spend time with lifting you up, or are they holding you back? Because ultimately the people beside you can shape your destiny as much as your ambitions. Remember, the world sees your potential, and perhaps it's time you map out who can help you realize it. Let me take you back to the 1800s, to the compelling story of Frederick Douglass. Born into slavery, he was initially seen as someone who'd be shackled by his circumstances for life. And yet, the man became one of the greatest orators of his time, a fierce advocate for abolition and equal rights. How did he do this? He learned to read secretly, a simple act of rebellion that set him on a path to change not only his destiny, but the destiny of a nation. Now, what stands out to me is Douglass's persistence through adversity. Imagine it, each letter learned was a quiet act of defiance, a seed of potential that grew against all odds. Can you imagine the kind of belief you need to withstand such overwhelming opposition? He faced the risk of severe punishment every day, yet he maintained his resolve. As he once said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. That's a timeless principle right there. But let's switch gears and fast forward to the 20th century. Picture a man named Harlan Sanders, known today as Colonel Sanders. At the age of 65, when most people think about retirement, he embarked on a journey with his chicken recipe. And get this, he was rejected 1,009 times before anyone agreed to partner with him. That's a staggering number. Most of us would have given up after a handful of rejections, right? What both Douglass and Sanders show us is this tenacity, this unwillingness to give up regardless of the odds or how many doors slam shut in your face. And here's where it gets interesting. Persistence isn't just about enduring hardship. It's about strategic patience, figuring out when to pivot, when to press harder, and when to simply bide your time. Speaking of strategic pivots, let's talk about Reed Hastings. He started Netflix when the world still had blockbuster video stores on every corner. Everyone thought he was out of his mind to suggest streaming movies when DVDs were the norm. Yet Hastings saw the potential in digital technology and was willing to ride out the skepticism and challenges. Today, Netflix isn't just a company, it's a cultural icon. What drives someone like Hastings to push against the tide and come out on top? Part of it is vision, the ability to see not just what is, but what could be, even when no one else agrees. But it's also this relentless commitment to his mission, much like Douglas with his education and Sanders with his recipe. They all believed in their potential to change things and were willing to endure a lot of discomfort on their journeys. Now you're probably wondering, how does this apply to me today? Well, think about the personal and professional challenges you face. Maybe it's a job that feels like a dead end or a personal goal that seems constantly out of reach. What if you approach these challenges with the same persistence that Douglas, Sanders, or Hastings did? Easier said than done, I know, but that's where the magic happens. So let's break it down. Start by believing in your potential, even if no one else does. Then, strategically assess when to fight and when to pivot. Embrace setbacks as learning opportunities. You see, it's not just about enduring hardship. It's about growing from it. Every setback is a stepping stone to something greater if you're willing to learn from it and adjust your strategy. Think of it this way. Life is less about what happens to you and more about how you respond to it. The world may not always recognize your potential, but you need to. So the next time you're staring down a challenge, remember these stories. Douglas, Sanders, Hastings, they're not just historical figures. They're examples of what you can achieve with unyielding persistence. And let me leave you with this thought. She doesn't love you. She loves your potential. What a profound way to see it. This isn't just about romantic relationships. It's about how the world interacts with you. People, opportunities, success, they're often drawn not to who you are right now, but to who you can become. So what's your next move? How will you push through adversity to realize your potential? Let me take you back in time for a moment to the rough and tumble days of the 1850s. Picture a young man, not particularly impressive in stature, sulking in a log cabin in the backwoods of Illinois. That young man was Abraham Lincoln, and he was grappling with what seemed like endless cycles of failure and heartbreak. Yet, despite the odds stacked against him, he harbored this persistent, almost irrational belief in his potential to forge a better, more just world. Now, how does a gangly, self-taught lawyer with a string of failed businesses and political campaigns become the President of the United States? Here's what Lincoln understood. Your current circumstances don't define you. It's your relentless faith in your own potential that shapes your future. Now, flash forward to the early 20th century. Walt Disney, a young artist struggling to make ends meet, was fired from a newspaper job because, get this, they thought he lacked imagination. How ironic is that, right? So here's a guy penniless, essentially being told he's no good at what he loves most. But instead of letting that define him, Disney doubled down on his belief in himself. It was this fierce faith that led him to create Mickey Mouse and what we now know as the Disney Empire. What's the common thread here? It's this unwavering belief in their own potential, a kind of faith that transcends immediate circumstances. But here's the thing. It's not just about believing in this grand version of yourself. It's about taking tangible steps towards it day after day. Let's talk about Leonardo da Vinci for a second. Before he became the quintessential Renaissance man, he spent years apprenticing, practicing sketching, often in obscurity. Da Vinci didn't just dream of flying machines and masterpieces, he worked tirelessly on them, hours on end. His belief wasn't just passive wishing, it was actionable faith manifesting through every sketch, every invention, every failure. He understood that faith without works is dead. And isn't that something we can all reflect on? I mean, how often do we have these big dreams but fail to act on them? So how do we apply this in our lives today? Consider a modern example, Oprah Winfrey, who grew up in poverty and faced unimaginable obstacles throughout her youth. What set her apart wasn't just her talent, though she had that in spades. It was her steadfast belief in her own capabilities. She trusted in her vision for a better future and took steps, small at first, to make it a reality. Her journey is a testament that it's the psychology of belief, not just raw talent, that propels you forward. And look, it's not just about career success. I mean, Theodore Roosevelt, for instance, transformed his frail, asthmatic body into the very image of robust health. He didn't just believe in the potential for a healthy life, he actively pursued it, embracing the outdoors and a rigorous regimen. What Roosevelt shows us is that belief paired with action can literally reshape who you are. So what's the psychology behind all these stories? Belief or faith in oneself acts like a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you genuinely believe you can achieve something, you're more likely to take the steps that bring you closer to it. It's almost like your brain starts working in the background, finding ways to make that belief a reality. And we see this play out time and time again across all these examples, whether they're presidents, artists, or media moguls. But how do we cultivate this mindset? Here's what I've learned. Start by envisioning your success, but don't stop there. Break it down into actionable steps. Each small victory boosts your confidence and reinforces your belief. It's like building a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. Ask yourself, what small step can I take today that aligns with my highest potential? How can I turn belief into tangible action? Remember, it's not about waiting for the world to validate your potential. It's about recognizing it within yourself and nurturing it until the world can't help but notice. That's the power of belief and faith. It's not magic, it's a mindset. Let me tell you about criticism. Now, most of us, when we hear the word criticism, we flinch a little. It's almost as if someone's pointing out our failures. But here's what I've learned. Those criticisms, those setbacks, they're not just obstacles. They're opportunities for growth if we know how to handle them. Picture Frederick Douglass. Talk about facing criticism and setbacks. This man started life as a slave, yet he rose to become one of the greatest orators and thinkers of his generation. How does that happen? How does someone break through such insurmountable barriers? Well, Douglass had this incredible ability to take what others might see as limitations or criticisms of his capacity and turn them into fuel. There's a story about how he learned to read. You know, reading was illegal for slaves back then, but Douglass was determined. He picked up whatever scraps of newspapers he could find. He asked young white boys in the neighborhood to help him understand letters and words. Every piece of new information was like adding kindling to a fire. He wasn't just learning to read, he was preparing to speak, to write, to change the world. And then there's Barbara Corcoran, famous for her role on Shark Tank now, but she didn't start with a multi-million-dollar business. She started with a $1,000 loan, right? And she faced endless criticism. People doubted her ability to succeed in real estate in New York City. For her, those criticisms weren't just critiques, they were challenges. She learned from every single one, used them to reassess, to pivot, and ultimately build a $6 billion empire. Can you imagine the kind of mental resilience it takes to look at a criticism and say, you know what, I can turn this into a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block? Now, let's take a walk down memory lane to someone very special to me, my own journey. Before I penned Think and Grow Rich, I interviewed hundreds of men, and I have to tell you, I faced my fair share of skepticism. People asked Napoleon, what are you doing? Why interview so many people? What if it doesn't even work? And you know what? That doubt, those questions, they pushed me to dig deeper. They were a crucible for refining my theories. I published it when I was 49. It took time, but the setbacks were crucial to the process. They weren't failures. They were stepping stones. But let's not gloss over the psychology here. When we face criticism, our first reaction is often defensive. Our ego gets bruised, right? It's normal. But here's where the twist comes in. If we can move past that initial sting and ask, what can I learn from this? We unlock something magical. Criticism, if we let it, can teach us where our blind spots are. It's like a free consultation on how to get better delivered right to your door. Isn't that incredible? So what about today? How does this apply to us sipping our coffee, staring down our inboxes full of feedback? The next time someone points out a flaw, or when a project doesn't go as planned, ask yourself, what's this teaching me? It's more than just bouncing back, it's about bouncing forward. Turning feedback into a forward path takes patience, takes grit. But it's the making of great people. It's how you turn potential into reality. Think about Michael Jordan. Remember, he didn't make his high school basketball team at first. Imagine that one of the greatest players in the history of the sport wasn't good enough initially, but he didn't see that as a sign to quit. Instead, he worked harder, trained longer, and used that initial rejection to fuel his legendary career. Criticism showed him where he needed to improve, and he took that feedback to heart. And that, my friends, is the power of harnessing criticism and setbacks. That's where true success lies. So, what are you going to do with your next criticism? How can you use it to unlock your potential? Remember, the world may not love you yet, but it surely loves your potential. It's up to you to make that potential undeniable. That's the true challenge and the beauty of learning from criticism. So I'm sure you've heard of the legendary Theodore Roosevelt, right? Now here's a guy who was born into a world of privilege but was plagued with asthma so severe it nearly killed him as a kid. Now this is the part that gets me. He didn't just let that define him. His father told him, "You have the mind but not the body. You must make your body." And young Teddy took that to heart. He committed to what he called the strenuous life, turning small, consistent actions into a transformation both physically and mentally. Imagine this. He started boxing, hiking, and lifting weights, slowly building up his resilience and strength. Over time, the sickly kid turned into a robust, vigorous man who launched his political career and became President of the United States. Isn't it incredible how those seemingly small, everyday actions snowballed into a complete reinvention of himself? That's the compound effect in action, a principle that's as timeless as it is powerful. Now let's switch gears and talk about someone like Frederick Douglass. Douglass was born into slavery, yet he carved out a path to become one of the most formidable orators and writers of his time. Here's a fascinating tidbit. He learned to read by cleverly getting neighborhood boys to share their knowledge in exchange for bread. He often said that literacy was his pathway from slavery to freedom. Consistent learning and accumulating knowledge, no matter how incremental, propelled him forward. It's proof that potential is not just about where you start, but about what you do with what you have. And it doesn't stop there. Think about Andrew Carnegie, a titan of industry. This guy started as a bobbin boy, a pretty lowly job spinning yarn, working 12-hour days. But here's the kicker. He didn't just settle. Carnegie had this vision and ambition that motivated him to learn the ins and outs of the steel industry, eventually becoming one of the wealthiest men in America. His journey shows how continuous learning and patient investment in oneself can revolutionize a life. What's the psychology behind all these stories? It's pretty simple, really. It's about the belief that small actions, repeated consistently, build momentum. You know, a lot of people underestimate the power of consistency. They think success comes only from massive, grand gestures. But in reality, it's those small daily habits that pave the path to greatness. If you're listening and wondering, how does this apply to me? Well, let me ask you this. What small, consistent action could you start today that might seem insignificant now, but could massively change your future? It might be reading a page a day, writing a paragraph each morning, or reaching out to one new person in your industry every week. Whatever it is, remember that it's the accumulation of these actions that compounds over time, ultimately unleashing your potential. But here's the thing, it's not just about the action itself, it's about cultivating the mindset that values progress over perfection. It's about being patient with the process, even when results aren't immediately visible. Michael Jordan, the basketball legend, once said that he had missed more than 9,000 shots in his career. But each of those misses taught him something, and his persistence transformed them into opportunities for growth. His story is a testament to how persistence in the face of setbacks is what propels us forward. Ultimately, it all boils down to this: are you willing to plant the seeds today, trusting that they'll eventually bloom? Because in a world that loves your potential, it's your consistent actions, no matter how small or trivial seeming, that make that potential undeniable. So what are you going to do today to start the journey toward your own greatness? So picture this, it's the late 1400s, and in a small workshop in Florence, there's a young man, Leonardo da Vinci, who's not yet a household name. He's not the Renaissance man we all know, with paintings hanging in the most prestigious museums around the world. No, he's just a curious apprentice, surrounded by sketches, notes, and half-finished projects. You'd think, what does this guy have that's special? Well, let me tell you, it's his potential, an untapped well of creativity and intellect that's simmering beneath the surface, just waiting for the right moment to explode into brilliance. Leonardo wasn't born with some divine gift that set him apart. No, it was his relentless pursuit of knowledge and self-discipline that carved his path. He wasn't afraid to work in obscurity either. The dude spent years studying anatomy by dissecting human corpses, which, you know, wasn't exactly a glamorous gig back then. But here's the thing, every sketch, every note he jotted down became a stepping stone that elevated his potential into tangible genius. He started by connecting with the world around him, understanding it deeply, and then weaving it into his art and inventions. Now fast forward to the 19th century and meet Frederick Douglass. Born into slavery, he had every conceivable obstacle thrown at him. Can you imagine the sheer audacity of dreaming about influence and success from such a place? Yet Douglass didn't just dream, he strategized and took action, one risky step at a time. He taught himself to read and write, understanding that communication would be his key to influence. It was through these small, consistent actions that he transformed from a slave into one of the most powerful voices for freedom and equality. It's mind-blowing how he didn't let his circumstances define him, but used them as a launching pad for his potential. And what about Michael Jordan? We've all heard the story cut from his high school basketball team. Ouch! But did he throw in the towel? Absolutely not. That setback was a catalyst, sparking a fire that pushed him to work harder, train smarter, and frankly out-hustle everyone else. His story is pretty legendary, but behind the slam dunks and championship rings was a guy who recognized the potential within himself and was adamantly persistent in chiseling away at it. He wasn't defined by his early failures, but by his response to them. That's powerful, right? It shows us how sometimes setbacks are just setups for a comeback. Here's what links all these stories. Whether it's a Da Vinci in a dusty studio, Douglass with a forbidden book, or Jordan dripping sweat on the court, they each had this intrinsic understanding that their potential was just the starting line. The finish line was somewhere far ahead, and it was their commitment to continual growth and building authentic relationships with those who could guide them that carried them to success. These relationships weren't superficial. They genuinely connected with others, mentors, peers who saw and fueled their potential. So how does this apply to us today? We live in a world that's more interconnected than ever. But here's the kicker. True influence requires more than likes or followers. It demands that we build meaningful connections just like these great figures did. It's about showing up consistently, doing the work, and finding people who challenge us while holding a mirror to our potential. In a way, it's about being inspired by them and learning to inspire others in turn. The beauty of it is, you don't need to start with the perfect plan. Look at Theodore Roosevelt. No one pegged him as a model of masculinity when he was stuck indoors with asthma, but he worked on what he could control. He transformed himself through pure grit and determination, building a body and a reputation that became a beacon for others. It's all about those persistent actions, right? Just like those small steps by Da Vinci or Douglass were transformational, your consistent actions can unlock your potential and influence. So the question is, what small steps will you take today? Imagine looking back years from now and seeing a trail of actions that led you to become the person you want to be. That's the power of your potential once it's set in motion. All right, picture this. It's the late 1920s, and a young Napoleon Hill has just spent years crisscrossing the country, interviewing some of the most successful men of his time. He's spoken to innovators, industrialists, and thinkers. You name them, he probably had them over a cup of coffee, or more likely a slightly more formal meeting. He's collecting wisdom like it's golden nuggets, and then at the age of 49, he finally publishes what would become a legendary work. But here's what I find fascinating. Hill didn't just stumble onto success. He was digging into the potential of these individuals, the raw material that they transformed into something truly remarkable. Now let's take a journey through time to the life of Frederick Douglass, Born into slavery, Douglas was never supposed to learn to read or write, let alone become one of the greatest orators and writers of his age. But here's the kicker: Douglas had vision. He saw potential not just in himself, but in the power of ideas and the ability to sway hearts and minds. By teaching himself to read and write, he was taking bold, perhaps even dangerous action given his circumstances. Fast forward, and he was leading a movement proving that thinking differently can indeed reshape one's destiny. Bringing it back to modern times, I can't help but think about Oprah Winfrey. She got fired from her first television job for being too emotionally invested, but in a way it was that very quality, her emotional investment in stories and people, that became her hallmark. Oprah's potential wasn't just about talent on screen, it was about connecting with people on a deeper level, which turned out to be the foundation of her incredible innovation in the media landscape. So what do all these stories have in common? It's the ability to see potential where others might see nothing. Whether it's Douglas's fierce literacy in the face of oppression, or Oprah's empathy as a powerful tool, or Hill's relentless pursuit of knowledge, it's about thinking differently and taking action. They all faced circumstances that could have been seen as limiting, yet they chose to navigate those waters with an innovative mindset. Here's the thing: potential isn't just about untapped skills or abilities. It's deeply linked to our mindset, the way we choose to interpret challenges, opportunities, and setbacks. In every story, there's that moment of choice. Do I see a wall, or do I see a door that can be opened? There's a psychological shift that happens when you start to view the world through the lens of possibility rather than restriction. Let me bring this back to you. Today, in our fast-paced, constantly evolving world, it's easy to get caught up in the noise. But what if you took a step back and asked yourself not just what you can do, but what you can become? Every great innovator, thinker, or leader at some point had to believe in the potential of something unseen. What small steps can you take today to start realizing your potential? What bold actions feel just out of reach but could transform your path? And as we wrap this up, remember that innovation stems from thinking differently and taking those bold actions, just like Hill, Douglas, and Oprah. It's about not just dreaming of what could be, but also daring to make it a reality. She doesn't love you for where you are, my friend. She loves the amazing potential you haven't even fully tapped into yet. So what are you waiting for? Let's start that journey.